Most of Week 12 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with the game between the Bills and Texans. The Texans won with a score of 23-19 in a game where they forced 3 turnovers and sacked Josh Allen 8 times. And my biggest takeaway with the Texans is, if somehow, someway this team gets into the postseason, then this is by every definition a team nobody wants to play in January. And after starting out 0-3, they are now 6-5, and the biggest thing for them is the path is there. They play at Indy and at Kansas City in their next 2 games, and if they can split those, there's a very real chance they win out and finish the year with an 11-6 record. And Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are problems for opposing offensive lines, and that's a tremendous understatement. This was a huge win for Houston, and the biggest takeaway again for them, the path and opportunity is there. Now with Buffalo, this is their 3rd straight game in which they've turned the ball over 3 times, and this is the first time I've said this in a few years, but I think this team has a lot of problems. Their receiving core is bad, their roster is not great, and with the Patriots' remaining schedule, I don't think Buffalo is going to win the division, meaning I think they'll be a wild card team, and I don't think Buffalo is going to win 3 straight road playoff games just to get to the Super Bowl. And this was a Super Bowl or bust year for the Bills, and there's a very real possibility they don't get out of the divisional round. And I try not to be too reactionary, but with how this team played and given the path likely ahead of them, I think in a lot of ways, the Bills' season is over. The Ravens beat the Jets 23-10, and they not only beat the Jets, but are also huge winners from Week 12 because the Bears beat the Steelers too. And when the Ravens were 1-5, the biggest thing we hammered home was this was not a true 1-5 team. It never was. And we kept saying that the path for them to be 6-5 was there, and this is what good organizations do. They capitalize on opportunities and beat the teams in front of them, and this was the easier part of the Ravens' schedule, and they did exactly that. Now, 2 things can be true at once. I don't think the Ravens offense played particularly well in this game, and I don't think they played great against the Browns last week or even at Minnesota 2 weeks ago. And that will be the thing I'm paying attention to most over the next couple of weeks. Now, with the Jets, with where their season is, I think this was about as good of a loss as you can hope for. You didn't get beat 48-7, you didn't embarrass yourself, and you had an opportunity to win this game. Sure, it wasn't pretty, but this will be the worst roster of the Darren Muji era. So for this team to be in games with what is clearly not their quarterback of the future, as well as the defense holding their own against a 2-time MVP quarterback and a Hall of Fame running back, along with not embarrassing themselves, I think this is all you can hope for at this point. Also, it was good to see more receivers in the mix for the Jets with Tyrod Taylor than with Justin Fields. We're on to Cincinnati as the Patriots beat the Bengals 26-20, and despite the Patriots winning, it's not an exaggeration to say that was one of the few positives from this game. Will Campbell and Jared Wilson both left the game early, and if those guys are out for extended periods of time, then those are season-altering injuries. The Patriots have had a very fun year, and for reference, they were 7th in points per game and 5th in points allowed per game entering Week 12, but this was a rare ugly win for New England. They need to work on the goal line offense, which I think can be worked on over the next few weeks, but all in all, the Pats are 10-2. The Bengals fell to 3-8 with this loss, and while they had an opportunity to win this game, I really questioned the idea of bringing back Joe Burrow as soon as they have, and there was talks about him playing in this game. This is obviously a lost season, and I don't know how much blame you should put on Zach Taylor or any of the coaching staff for this game when you were already down your franchise quarterback and number 1 receiver, and on top of it, T. Higgins also sustained a very nasty injury in this game, and we of course wish nothing but the best for anyone who was hurt in Week 12 and hope the best for them in recovery. I don't expect the Bengals to win many more games this year, though if there is one positive thing to say, I will say the defense has looked significantly better over the past couple of weeks. The Seahawks went into Nashville and won with a score of 30-24, and what do you know? Jackson Smith-Njigba had another great game. JSN finished this game with 167 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Seahawks improved to 8-3. Now, there were a lot of frustrating things within this game for Seattle, such as committing 11 penalties for 69 yards, nice, and some would say the timing of these penalties were a little coincidental. But Seattle lost a very hard-fought division game in Week 11, and the biggest thing for Seattle that they had to do in this game was go on the road to play an early game and take care of business, especially after a game in which their quarterback threw 4 interceptions last week. And they did, and that's what matters most. With Tennessee, well, like we said with the Jets, I think this was a best case scenario for them. I do not think this is an exaggeration to say this was Cam Ward's best game so far, and you looked presentable for most of the game, and still lost. I know Titans fans understand where I'm coming from, but the best thing this team can continue to do is lose, because having a number 1 pick in the 2026 draft sets you up for a chance to really hit the rebuild the right way. And another big thing to remember is this team is not a player or two away. So if they can get the number 1 pick in the draft and give Cam Ward another big weapon like a Jordan Tyson, or even draft a franchise pass rusher in Ruben Bain while still trading back a spot or two, that's what matters. And again, the best part, Cam Ward played the best game of his rookie year. The Lions survived a scare from the Giants as they won with a score of 34-27, and this was the Jahmyr Gibbs game. I have said this before, and obviously you can go look up other running backs' numbers and what they did in their careers, but Jahmyr Gibbs from the eye test is truly one of the best running backs I've ever seen. And in this game, he had 264 total yards and 3 touchdowns, and this was individually one of the best performances of the 2025 season. And with this win, because remember the Lions lost in Week 11 to Philly, the Lions have not lost back-to-back games in over 3 years, and this was by every definition a trap game or a look-ahead game as they play the Packers on Thursday. I don't want to gloss over the fact that there is a lot to clean up defensively, but the biggest thing for Detroit is they won and kept pace with the Packers and Bears. Now, for the Giants, this is a game that's been played multiple times this season. Whether it was the Cowboys game in Week 2 or the Broncos game in Week 7, this was a very winnable game. I would not be surprised if Shane Bowen is fired while you're watching this video on Monday, as this is the same song and dance we've seen throughout the 2025 season. I know people joke about Jameis, and I do really enjoy watching Jameis Winston play, but he did everything he could to give this team a chance to win. They had over 500 yards of offense, Jameis had a receiving touchdown, and Wan'Dale Robinson had over 150 receiving yards too. And all things considered, the final 5 games will be interesting to see if Mike Kafka can be the team's head coach in 2026, but there obviously needs to be a coaching change at defensive coordinator. The Bears. Yes, the Chicago Bears are 8-3 after a 31-28 win over the Steelers, and this was a huge win for the Bears, not just because they won, but because they won while down several players on defense, and there was also a play that was a tremendous play by TJ Watt that we can also acknowledge should have been thrown away by Caleb Williams, and both things can be true. But for the Bears to spot a team 7 points and still come out on top, and still be atop the NFC North through 12 weeks, well, there's not much more you can ask for in Ben Johnson's first year. Caleb Williams still had 3 passing touchdowns, Kyle Monangai had a rushing touchdown, and just when it seems like you forget about DJ Moore, he has 2 touchdowns in a big win for the Bears. Good, better, best. And for the Steelers, this is a frustrating loss for several reasons. The Bears' defense was extremely banged up. Extremely. And not only that, but he ran for over 180 yards on the road, and granted 55 came on one play from Kenneth Gainwell, but this was a game that, I'm sorry, you have to win and capitalize on the opportunity. I mean, if you have playoff aspirations, that is. I know Mason Rudolph played this game at quarterback, but this was a winnable game. The double short routes at the end was also infuriating, and I understand Steelers fans' anger. And why this is a double whammy is the Steelers' next 2 games are home against the Bills and at the Ravens, and there is a very real possibility this team goes from 6-4 to 6-7. The Chiefs survived the Colts 23-20, and I think that's the best way you can describe this game for Kansas City. They ran 91 plays to Indy's 50 and put up just 23 points. They did improve to 6-5, and ultimately this is what matters most, but I worry about this team as we enter December, and especially given the fact they will almost inevitably have to go on the road 3 times to get to the big game. But within this game, I was very glad to see the Chiefs stick with the run, because that was something they did not do in Week 11 against the Broncos, and in Week 12, Kareem Hunt went for over 100 yards. But this team was 1 of 6 in the red zone in terms of touchdowns, and that has to be noted as we enter Week 13. The end result for the Chiefs was good, but how they got there certainly wasn't pretty. For Indy, I know they lost, but I don't think it's the end of the world. There were very preventable things in this game, most notably having a 3-and-out with 5 minutes left in the game, and having 2 of the 3 plays result in incomplete passes. And regarding the Chiefs' run game, well, DeForest Buckner is out, and if you're looking for a panic reaction about the Colts and how the sky is falling because they couldn't beat the Chiefs, and now the Texans are coming, this is the wrong channel for you. The path is there for Houston, yes, but I don't think Indy is a bad team, and I thought this was a very winnable game. Now, if they lose in a bad way to Houston next week, that's a different conversation. But right now, no, the Colts are fine at the moment. The Green Bay Packers defeated the Minnesota Vikings 23-6 in Week 12, and this game was close until the Vikings committed a huge special teams blunder at the beginning of the third quarter, and it was downhill from there. Joe Davis and Greg Olsen at a point said this was the worst half of football they've seen a team play, and there was a point in the second half where the Vikings had negative 22 yards as an offense. For Green Bay, there's not a lot to say, other than this was a good team win that took advantage of a bad team's mistakes, and that they improved to 7-3-1, which they needed to do to keep up with the Bears. Micah Parsons is incredible, and Emmanuel Wilson played well in relief of Josh Jacobs, and the defense of course played awesome. Now, you guys know I'm a Vikings fan, and this is not an exaggeration to say, this is the most painful season I've seen this team play in my life. There's been bad years, but this takes the cake, and when this team inevitably loses by double digits in Seattle in Week 13, there will be a video later next week discussing this team's future and everything that should happen this offseason. This was a sorry effort, this was a pitiful performance, and both GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and special teams coordinator Matt Daniels should be fired. And if you think I'm avoiding the quarterback question or discussion, JJ McCarthy also played terrible in this game, and the final 6 games of 2025 are what I would say is an extended tryout for whether or not he's the guy in 2026. Bottom line, this is a bad situation. The Jags beat the Cardinals 27-24, and this game was the full Trevor Lawrence experience. Trevor threw 3 touchdowns and also threw 3 interceptions, and the Jags improved to 7-4. Jacksonville, of course, beat the Chargers 35-6 in Week 11, and I was ecstatic for the Jags, especially with how they lost to Houston in Week 10, but they also reminded me of the Panthers in some ways, where as soon as expectations increase, they lose and you're almost back to square one. I would say the Jags defense was the real MVP of this game, as they overcame 4 Jags turnovers, including a touchdown by the Cardinals defense, and still won. The path for the Jags is there, but due to the inconsistency of the offense, I'm going to be honest, I am really hesitant to buy in with this team. With the Cardinals, unfortunately, this game summarizes the Jonathan Gannon era. The Cardinals won the turnover battle 4-0, they won the time of possession battle by nearly 9 minutes, and they held the Jags to just 3 of 11 on third down. Obviously, the play call at the end was bad by Drew Petzing, but in fairness, it should have never came down to that to begin with. And it's a real shame this team is where they are, because I would argue they are nowhere close to a 3-8 team from a talent standpoint. But as we know, and as we see every Sunday, games come down to one score far more often than not, and the Cardinals can't win close games. And the reality is, the Jags are who they thought they were, and they let them off the hook. The Falcons and Saints played one of the games of the 2025 season, as Atlanta won with a score of 24-10 in a game where Kirk Cousins threw for 2 touchdowns as Atlanta improved to 4-7. I know this was a win for Atlanta, and obviously they've had a disappointing season, but the game Kirk Cousins played in Week 12 would have easily been one of Michael Penix's best games of the year. I know Kirk threw the pick 6, but it wasn't on Kirk, especially with how it happened. And that to me only ups the question of whether or not Michael Penix is the guy next year. And we'll have all offseason to discuss that, but this was a much better showing for the Falcons offense, and it's always good to beat your arch rival. And if you're not aware, this truly is one of the most hated rivalries in football. And the Falcons pass rush also had a good day, and for a team that didn't have a pass rush for several years, well, they have one now, and it's really good. With the Saints, this was not a good game on several fronts. Tyler Shuck was okay, but it's hard to get a true evaluation of him as a player when everything around him was as bad as it was in this game. The Saints offense put up 3 points, which is, well, bad, and it certainly doesn't help your rookie quarterback when your kicker misses 2 field goals too. The Saints were moving the football, they just couldn't finish drives. Yes, they're 2-9 and this is a rebuilding year, but it's extremely frustrating when the opportunities are there and they fail to capitalize time and time again. The Browns beat the Raiders 24-10, and the only logical takeaway I think you can have from this game: Shedeur Sanders is the franchise quarterback. Period. Set in stone. Work on the contract extension as soon as you can. But in all seriousness, there is a huge difference between Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, and I think this game showed it. You can think Shedeur may not work out in the long run, but he was never going to go 4 of 16 every week like he did coming in as a backup in Week 11. He stretched the field in numerous throws, and I thought the offense played with a lot more energy than we've seen, honestly, all year. Also, the word generational is thrown around far too often in the pre-draft process, but Myles Garrett was a generational prospect, and he has, by every definition, lived up to the pre-draft hype. And then some. He's a first-ballot Hall of Famer and, barring injury, will more than likely break the NFL sack record by season's end, and he is truly a one-of-one talent. With the Raiders, I don't have a lot to say that you probably don't already think. We did a video earlier last week on the worst situations in football, and I recommend watching it after this one, but the Raiders are, again, truly one of the worst situations in the NFL, and I feel bad for Raiders fans for obvious reasons, but it's another thing to watch your team play week in and week out, and they look like they don't care. This team plays without passion, the situation is obviously bad, and they're staring another new head coach in the face just months after hiring their third head coach in 4 years. And there's no sugarcoating it, this is bad all the way around. The Dallas Cowboys beat the Eagles 24-21 in a come-from-behind win as the Eagles were up 21-0 with a minute left in the second quarter. And in this game, Dak Prescott threw for over 350 yards and 2 touchdowns, and George Pickens continues to be one of the best receivers in football as he had 146 yards in a game where CeeDee Lamb had 3 drops. The Cowboys are 5-1 on the year, and this was obviously a big win, but I will be hesitant to buy in with this team when their next 2 games are home against the Chiefs on Thanksgiving and at the Lions. But after that, well, they can win out. And the Cowboys are slowly coming around. George Pickens is playing like a top 5 receiver, and this defense pitched a shutout for nearly 3 quarters. The biggest takeaway, if you are a Cowboys fan, is the opportunity is there and it's clear as day. There is a path for this team to get to the postseason. For the Birds, this was an ugly game on several fronts, and you can honestly take your choosing. Saquon Barkley fumbled for the first time all year, which was extremely unfortunate timing, especially in a game where he averaged 2.2 yards per carry. This team also had 0 points in the final 40 minutes of the game, and A.J. Brown actually got the football early on, and good things happened. Who would have thought? The play calling was far too conservative, and I think the Eagles have been playing with fire at times this year, and they got burned in Week 12. And to me, the reality of the situation for the Birds is this can go one of 2 ways. You can have a 2023 spiral, or you can lock in and realize things need to change, and you can do that on Friday against the Bears. But with how this game specifically ended, and with how this team could not run the ball, and knowing Lane Johnson is out for about a month, I think it is a little concerning in the city of brotherly love. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as a football will appear when you like the video and is very much appreciated and also helps tremendously with YouTube algorithm. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.